At the time of recording this, the weather outside is frightful, but inside it's so delightful. But if you've got no particular place to go, then stay around and listen to this. Hi, and welcome to A Better Way of Life with me, Graham Coath, and Marianne Mills. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, I've had a busy week, completely different to last week where I was out training. This week I've been doing all the stuff that nobody sees that makes all that stuff possible. And I've had the equivalent of an Ofsted type check. So that was a stressful night last night, but it's all good.
Good. Well, I'll give you a little spritz. There you are, just to to calm you down after a week of that sort of stuff. I've had such a busy week; it's unbelievable. I've been doing a lot of this week. It seems that I've almost not stopped talking, which some people will say, "Well, what's different about that and the normal week?" But actually, normally I do a little bit of talking, and then actually I go and do some quiet type stuff, and then I do a bit of talking. But this has been constant kind of talk all week, which I'm not complaining about. But it will be nice actually tonight to go. I'm going to go and see Mean Girls tonight at the cinema. Haven't been to see that yet. I don't know whether Gary's, who's going to be our guest in a minute, whether he's seen it or not. But apparently it's nothing like the original. So I'll let you know at some stage.
Is it a long film or?
I don't know, but it's a musical.
Oh.
So yeah. And they are always hit or miss, as far as I'm concerned. Sometimes they're great. Sometimes
we're not a fan in our house. I think it's the boys say you wouldn't really be walking down the street and people start dancing. I think that's particularly quite an autistic thing that I'm like, yeah, but that I get where they're coming from, because you've got to really get into it, haven't you? Yeah, well, you've kind of got to get into it, haven't you? You've got to sort of be looking at it and then not be thinking that this is real, because obviously, but then they do watch Annie, the new one, over and over and over, but they fast forward.
Well, I'm going to say here, I can't agree that you can be walking down the street and then, people break out into massive dance routines and with really great choreography and all of that. But I do quite like dancing down the street.
Yeah, but if it's not your thing, if that's not your thing, and remind me that if I walk down the street, just to step away from you if you look like you're gonna.
Yeah. Let's ask Gary, our guest, what he would do. Gary, do you ever walk down the street and just have a little dance or a little sing? I mean,
every day, Graham.
Yeah, you see,
it's good for the soul. It's good for the soul. But it's interesting, musicals. I think musicals are great, wonderful. It's a bit of a fantasy because, let's be honest, Graham, people don't walk down the street generally. But one of the things that I can't understand with people dancing in the street or anywhere else is rhythm. How many people just do not have rhythm?
So I could do that. I could dance going down the road.
You see people go to musicals or concerts and they're clapping their hands and they're just on the off beat or whatever, or not on the beat at all. And my mind can't compute that at all. I don't get it. So,
here's the thing, Gary. I've got a particular kind of condition, because if it comes to like clapping or playing guitar or anything like that, I can do rhythm, right? Rhythm's fine, works perfectly like that. But when it comes to dance, no, it just goes. It's just to me the two things.
We'll be all right together. I'll do the dancing and you can do the playing.
The two things aren't linked. Now, before you introduce yourself, I just want to say one more thing on the clapping thing, because you brought it up. I sometimes deliberately clap on the offbeat when we go to concerts and things, because I think it's quite funny. Like when everybody else is clapping like that, and I'll be, and then I'll clap on the alternative beat, and I just think it's quite.
You're making Gary anxious if he's by you.
And try and put people off their clapping. I think it's quite good. I'm very loud. I've got a very loud clap. I've got an incredibly loud clap. Yeah, because the trick is you've got to cup your hand a little bit. A lot of people go for it too flat, but see, that's loud. You see, but there you go. Anyway, that's enough of that. Gary, thanks so much for coming on.
Very well.
Do you introduce yourself, please, sir?
Okay. Well, I'm an Essex boy. I'm never sure if that's a good thing or not. Born and bred in Essex. Work-wise, the last few years, I'm a bit of a chameleon in terms of changing, which I think most people have had to do over the years. I started life working in a brewery, strangely enough, which was absolutely great fun. Still got connections in there. But the last few years, sadly, since Grenfell, I've got more and more and more into fire. So I do an awful lot of fire risk assessments, fire training. And it's probably the pyromaniac in me that I've always been excited by fire. But I should also say fires that are in control and not that are out of control, because they can be quite devastating. But yeah, that's me the last few years. Before that, I was in brewing, training, so a whole load of things. And as the world is changing out there, I think we need to adapt to the market needs, or whatever people want to call them, along the way.
When you were in brewery, the brewery trade, were you involved in health and safety or training within the brewery trade as well? I mean, were you?
Well, it evolved from joining in the sales department. So I was a salesman, and it evolved from that into then doing some training. As I went through a couple of different breweries, I got into training, health and safety and fire. Back then, as you know, Graham, I'm very old, so it was a long time ago. But we didn't have health and safety departments as we do now. It was generally a health and safety rep, and it was, oh, you're sensible, you'll do. And I remember my boss at the time saying to me, we want you to do the health and safety. I said, yeah, no problem, but you need to train me on it. So fortunately, back then, I then got qualifications in health and safety, fire, etc. And as we know, this all gets updated all the time. But that was how I merged from sales into health and safety, into training. And I know certainly Marianne is very passionate about her training. And I think in the last few years, we've had quite a few discussions with our passion or our beliefs on what is available out there training wise, because there's some unbelievably brilliant courses, workshops, call them what you will. There's also some that are dire. And I love the fact that health and safety and fire, as soon as you say to someone, health and safety training, fire training, they glaze over and they think, oh, here we go. And so I suppose it was my mission to make health and safety and fire interesting, which I actually believe you can make any subject interesting. It's in the delivery, it's in putting it across in a way that people understand it. Real life.
Marianne, you've got to come in on this, but before you do, I just love the way you said dire. Because that's the thing, isn't it? Because dire, isn't it?
There you go. Danny.
It's like Danny. It's a bit Danny, isn't it? Marianne.
I missed that one. That one went over there. I get it. I do get it now, though. I get it. Yeah.
Picking up on what Gary was saying about training, good training, bad training. What makes good training? What makes bad training?
Who was I talking to about this? Well, actually, just my friend actually was over just earlier, because I was trying to persuade her into going into training. She said, I can't do that. And I said, but you can. You'd be really, really good. And she'd be really good because, A, she's got passion for what she does. But also, she said, but I said to her, I've noticed you talk things through. And I said, which gets you to the why. And that's a lot of the reason why, when you get people that just want to tell you everything they know about whatever it is, but if you don't get that why bit, because she said to me, I was just talking to her about my very lengthy career, and I said I'd done a psychology degree, and she said, I didn't know. And I said, yeah, I hated every second of it, but I know why I didn't like it now, because they literally used to just tell us everything they knew. Knowing what I know now I understand. But I used to sort of try and teach myself. I remember sitting in my cognitive neuropsychology exam. You know, that moment where you turn the paper over and it's going to either go one way or the other. And I kind of looked at it and thought, I don't think I know this. So everything just goes from your head. And then I sat there and I had a word with myself and I thought, come on, you know this. Take yourself right back to the very basics about neurons, about all this kind of stuff. And I kind of did what I try and do with people now, which was that building that brick wall up effectively and going, okay, just go back to what you do know. And then when you know that bit, then you can know that bit. But you can't do that unless you knew what it was all, do you know what I mean? What the foundations were. And I think that's what you were saying, Gary, that if people don't get the why and you don't capture their interest, it all becomes a bit of a, did you get what they were on about, if you see what I mean?
I mean, there's a couple of things that I've always said about training, and the older I get, it's like everything in life, is that the older you get, what you're doing is building up experience, memories, etc., so you can draw on that experience. But years and years ago, someone said to me, what makes a good trainer? And I sort of thought about this, and to me, and this still stands fast, there's two things. One is, whatever you're teaching, you have to have the knowledge in that subject. You've got to have the knowledge. That's you can't bypass that. But more importantly, I believe you've got to have the ability to impart that knowledge in such a way that the learner can understand it, because we know everyone learns in different ways. You know, grab a book and I glaze over. I need to talk to people face to face and keep asking questions, things like that. And again, going on that same subject, if I go back to my school days years and years ago, I now realize, as you just said this, Marianne, actually, I now realize why the subjects I really enjoyed, enjoyed them. And it wasn't about the girls in the class. It was about the teacher made the subject interesting and relayed it in a way that I can understand. Physics, I wish I'd done better at physics, but the teacher I had just regurgitated, really clever person, just regurgitated all this information, and it went like that.
Pointless. It's absolutely pointless. It's that show off, you know, and this is what I said to my friend earlier. You get those people that want to show off what they know. And somebody recently asking me, their son wants to go to uni to do psychology. And I said, oh, right, okay. I do love it now. I've taught it. So they said, what would you look for? And I said, well, if they want to do a BPS approved, arguably they're much of a muchness. They're going to be much of a muchness. It just really depends on where they want to go to. I said, however, my one bit of advice I will give, and it's something that somebody told me recently when I was doing the teacher training, because they worked at a university, that some of the unis will want them to be higher, that they'll put more of an emphasis on how high qualified they are, but some of them they'll be more interested in if they've got a teaching qualification. I said, go for the teaching qualification every day of the week. Go for that course, because I just know that I'm sure I remember I used to walk into my lectures and I was very conscientious, and I used to go back week after week, and I used to think, if I walked in late or something and missed something, because I used to sit there then the rest of the session going, I don't really get this. And I used to go back every week. I'm sure some people didn't, because I just didn't get it, because I didn't get what the heck they were talking about, because they just blinded with science. And so one of the things I do, aims and objectives. You've seen it, Graham, when I've done my bag of sweets thing. I don't know, Gary. And I did it with the firefighters last week. And I can see people don't really get it to begin with when I explain it just in words. then I do it with the sweets. And you can see for many people, the penny just drops and they're like, oh my gosh.
The light
Because
bulb moment.
it is that light bulb moment, and people can make those connections. But a lot of people are a bit scared to do that because they think it might sound a bit childish or a bit. And I think some people don't want people to get things because they quite like it. I don't want anyone to go out of that room and not understand because I've not done my job. Same as,
One of the benefits of having multiple conversations during the day is that you weirdly tend to find that a lot of those conversations tend to blend into each other, and actually you might be speaking to someone from one sector and then the next minute you're speaking to someone from another sector, but actually there's a lot that crosses over, and that there's a lot that we can all learn from each other. That's one problem, by the way, I think, which is that actually a lot of sectors work in silos, and they should talk to each other more, because I think we could actually learn from each other a lot more than we do. But prior to coming on to do this one today, just been in a podcast where we've been speaking to Christopher Allen, who's a highly regarded leadership coach and culture change coach. And we were talking about teaching at school and how it can let people down, and one of the problems is we don't, right from a young age, allow people this sense of it's great to not know, and it's great to fail and need to ask questions. And if we develop, even from a young age, kind of an embarrassment by you're the only one in the class that doesn't know the answer, then what that does is it prevails into the workplace, where actually people keep quiet because they don't know, and therefore we don't know that they don't know, and therefore we don't teach them. And the other thing that he said, and maybe you can pick up on these two things in a minute, the other thing he said, which I found really interesting, was that we don't give people permission to fail in the workplace. And in that, asking the question, we don't go back to basics enough on lots of things. We teach once, and then we think we've done that, we move on. We've done that, we move on. We very rarely stop and go, now, you remember when we did that? Should we revisit that? Just make sure that everybody really has picked up on that. But we don't do it. So often we just go, right, we're going to give everybody some training on this. Boom, boom, boom. And the basics thing he was saying as well is so often we jump a level and we go up to a level and we say we're going to do some higher level stuff on this or that. And half the people that are there don't even know the basics of that. So we miss out on some of the real nuanced stuff that is so important. You were saying just before you came on, Marianne, you were struggling with some tech, right? But we were saying in the conversation, how many people don't actually know how to use a lot of tech?
It is, right? Because, but that's the thing though as well. I know for me, like I was sort of an age at school, computers were kind of there, but everyone assumed then in the workplace that you knew how to use them, or you knew how. I kind of pick stuff up all the time. I kind of pick stuff up, and I think when I worked for the council, you'd get put on a course or something, and then it would bore me because they'd sort of go through every single little thing, and I'd be literally like bored stiff with it. And then you come to now, probably a few years ago, where people start going about cloud and drives, and I'm going, yeah, all right, because I'm too embarrassed to say, because someone uses a drive, someone uses a cloud, someone uses something else, and before you know it, I've got people firing stuff at me in different ways, and then I'm going, I don't know where everything is. It's somewhere, and now I've got my downloads on my computer are such that it's like a huge messy room that I just want to shut the door on, but I have to go in it to get stuff, because people just assume. And actually, as soon as one of my aunties not knowing how to use their phones when they first sort of came out, but more of the smartphones and not the internet. And I said, just see it like a book. And that you just have to go to each of those pages. Just go to each of those pages, and they're like chapters in a book. And because I explained it to them like that, they understood it. But they'd seen it the way I do the back of my computer, like there's just a load of holes there and I don't know what those things do. Whereas if I knew what the point was, then when I come to do it again, I'll go, right. Someone said the other day about not being able to do things. I said, look, I can do anything. Maybe. But I have to be shown first. I have to have someone teach me, and then I can then teach myself to do the harder stuff. But as you said, if you don't know, and it's at that very moment where I say, yeah, I get it, and I think, you idiot, you didn't get it. And now everybody assumes you understand it.
Yeah, I think it goes from that. You said the word assumption. We assume people know sometimes more than they actually do know. So it's always, again, training wise, you've got to start at a level, and it's not hard to ascertain where people are generally just by asking some questions early on. But I see a lot of trainers just jumping in, either this because they think mid or high level is what people want. And sometimes we need to go down there and let's just start down here. Okay, we've all got that. We can move up to here now. And I find it very interesting that as a society, and this does probably go back to my school days, that what you said, Graham, about we are embarrassed or whatever to admit that we don't know something. And one of the things I do on training, in fact, a few weeks ago, I delivered some training, and I said to these people that, to me, they're young people, they're sort of 18, probably average 18 to 30. I was there once, but it was a long time ago. And I said,
Wow.
when you go out after this training, go and make some good mistakes. And they sort of looked at me as if to say, well, we don't want to make mistakes. I said, no, you've heard the old thing. And I said this to them, you've heard this thing about we learn from our mistakes. Don't keep making the same mistake.
Yeah.
Don't keep doing the same thing. That's stupidity. But make a mistake, go and make a mistake, because you will learn from it. You'll never do it again. And people then turn around and they say, but what if everything's going well? I said, well, if it's all going really well, and don't make a mistake intentionally, but people are frightened to go out there and make a mistake. And Marianne knows that I love my quotes. The old Edison quote, when people said about the light bulb, and I'm sure it's a made up figure. How many attempts did it take him to make it? The figures are relevant. Let's say it's 1,000 times. Someone once said to him, why don't you give up? Because most human beings give up after 3 attempts. Statistics say we try something 3 times and we give up. And I know you lifted your phone up, Graham. We try and sort of put something on a phone, download an app or something. If it doesn't work after 3 times, we pass it to one of the kids or someone that knows. So generally we give up after 3 times. But someone said to Edison, why didn't you just give up? He said, you've sort of failed 999 times. Why didn't you give up? And apparently Edison turned around and said, no, I found 999 ways how not to make a light bulb. But he didn't keep sort of, well, let's plug it in and try it again. No, it didn't work. Plug it again. He's adapting his rinse and repeat, that sort of adapt. This isn't working. Right, let's tweak that bit. Let's try it again. Now it's still not working. Okay, let's try that. And if you think about it, 1,000 times to create a light bulb, most people in the world would have given up. 999 failures. But again, it's mindset. It's how he thought about it. And think about anyone that's sort of achieved or succeeded in anything. Generally, it's not happened first time.
And it was also what you're saying there as well, Gary, is also what was so powerful about the previous guest that we had on, Marianne, which is that there's someone that was actually saying we should use incidences in terms of behavior
to
learn from those incidences of behavior and then enable us to change behavior by learning from those incidences. And yet we organizationally, we still prevail towards a system where we go, well, actually, what we're going to do is we're going to record failure And not just in education, we do it in business as well. We're going to record failure, and we might write a report on it, but do we actually really learn from it? Because learning from it doesn't mean I'm going to punish somebody now, and then that doesn't happen again. Learning from it means, right, that's happened. We now re-evaluate everything that could have led to that, can lead on from that. We retrain so that we get better. We mitigate that happening again, but also we all grow together. And it should feel like a growth process. Too often, I don't mean it does feel like a growth process.
That's if you've got that. So, Gary, you're qualified to train as well. And yeah, I do have a bee in my bonnet about it. And I do. And I, from what you said, I suspect that where you were saying about the go out and make mistakes, that actually a lot of trainers, it just does become about them just standing up there telling them. But actually, when you know how and you've actually learned how to deliver training, you know the psychology behind it. I don't think it's any, generally speaking, I think with a lot of trainers, they might know their stuff and they'd be very good presenters. That is not the same. That isn't the same at all. And so, yes, it is what my business is, but I do that because I feel really passionate about it, because I see the difference from when people go from, I know my stuff, and whether that's they've never done any training before, delivered any at all, through to people that have been doing it years. Each one of them will say either it's great, I know how to do this now, or, oh gosh, I was doing it. And when they say, oh, it's been going well, I say, but now you're able to identify why it's going well. Because it could be you go and do something with another group and you think, oh my life, this worked last time. But actually, if you follow what Kolb says, if you use his model, and as I say to people, where do you think most people go wrong? And they'll say, oh, well, it's because they don't reflect on it. I said, no, they reflect. How often in life do we do it? And again, that's what I do. I get people I get them to pick something they do on a daily basis or whatever it might be. It could be relationships, dieting, whatever it is. And then look and say, where is it you think you went wrong, or you kept making that mistake? You knew that you shouldn't have done that. Or you realised, oh, shouldn't have done that. Better not do that next time. And then why did it go wrong? Because you did it again next time. That's why. You keep going round and round in those circles.
The other thing, and I'd love to get your input on this, Gary, as well, is that I think we unfortunately tend to measure the success of someone that's in a training position sometimes by commercial outcome, or by an outcome which doesn't necessarily look through the cracks. Okay, and by that I mean, we've all been in a situation whereby there might be somebody who's the best salesperson at work, right? Within an organization, they're hitting their targets, they're selling all of the time. And when they, as part of their role, train maybe clients or anybody else on what it is that they do, they get sales. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they are a good trainer. It just means that they convince people to buy. But it might mean that half the time when they sell somewhere later down that line, customer services or somebody else in the company are having to pick up the slack because those people that have bought something that they didn't actually, they bought incorrectly, or they don't actually understand what they're doing with whatever it was that was bought. So we see success in one area and we think, so they're good at doing this. And we've all been there probably in education at some point as well, where, we're presented with, today you've got a lecturer from, lecture by Dillala, and they've written several books on the subject and whatever. And they stand there in front of you, they open their mouth and you go, are they actually talking English? I have no idea what they're talking about. That was
in my lectures.
Whatsoever. I don't know her name, so I'm not going to embarrass her. I had a a lecturer at university for a course, part of the course called Ethnicity and Cultural Diversity. And this lecturer just talked about something to do with Russian Orthodoxy, etc. And multiple people in the classroom at times just stood up and went, "Sorry, we have no idea what you're talking about." They completely ignored what was going on. And people even walked out and they just carried on going with their own rhetoric. They just were so in their own little world. And you think, how on earth is that successful? How on earth? It doesn't matter how many books you've written, how many people go, yes, academically, you're incredibly bright and you're right at the top of the chain and whatever. If you're then put in a classroom situation and nobody's getting it, nobody's getting it.
But that's a prime example. That's a prime example of as well, when it's not all about the money, but when you look at the salary that trainers get, effectively you're doing two different things. You have to know your stuff inside out, and you've got to know how to deliver training. You have to know how to do that. And I know that in the social care sector, which I'm from, that certainly there was no reflection on how, and the risk. That's the other side of it, is that, again, that people just don't realise when you're getting up there, there's a whole legal side to it that can come back at you as well. And the salaries often don't reflect it. And I think that's because there isn't that value given to what it is you're doing, which is ironic, given that the greatest asset to your company is the people that are working for you. And let's just not actually spend much money on them when they're going to be delivering a service or making a product. I just don't get that at all. But when there's a problem, let's blame training.
Yeah. Well, here's a classic, and Marianne, I know we've spoken about this before, management training.
Oh, yeah.
Now, if people are salespeople, pilots, whatever, firefighters, police, anything at all, you go and get trained how to do that. And normally managers get into the position of management by being good at their job. And they say, oh, you're really good at your job. You're a great salesperson. You're a super firefighter. We're going to make you the manager. And all of a sudden, they've got people that report into them. And no one thinks, do you know what? Should we send these people on a management or a leadership course to understand how to interact? They're brilliant at their job.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden, they've got positions and they become really unstuck because they can't handle, well, I know how to sell, or I know how to, I don't know, brain surgeon, whatever. But all of a sudden, I've got these people asking me questions. What time can I go for lunch? And what can I do this? And I don't want any overtime this week or whatever. Whoa. No, that's not my job. Yes, it is. You're a manager. But no one ever teaches. I say no one ever. Of course we do. I do management courses. But people generally neglect managers that have just been put into a position. They've got promoted because they're really good at their job. And then they wonder why they fail.
Well, it's the two, training and management are the two, I would say, where people get, because they know their stuff or they've been there a long time. So training's probably they know their stuff, and management, they know their stuff and been there a long time, probably. Yeah. And the two are really, those are the bits where we were talking about culture change, whether it's training because you actually change, or whether it's, and they're two really, really responsible and important positions. And when you really look at who would be really good at doing those things, it really gets smaller and smaller. And there's really not very many people. There's some people that really know their stuff. Like you said, Graham, that lecturer, they really know their stuff. Absolutely know their stuff. But to actually be able to manage people or be a leader or be a trainer, you've got to have that extra.
Yeah.
Well, I've actually spoken to some very successful managers who have actually said to me, controversially maybe, I actually don't know an awful lot about anything. And I actually thought that was quite refreshing in a way. What they said is, what I know how to do is manage. But I don't. I don't know an awful lot about any of this stuff. That's the deep stuff within this company, and quite frankly, I don't care about it. What I care about is actually that I can manage this company and manage the team really effectively.
Yeah,
it sounds awful, but actually, in a way, it's almost right.
Do you think there's a difference between what do you think is the most important thing then, Gary, leadership or management? And do you think there's a different mindset? Because I was speaking to somebody I know recently who I definitely know is a leader, because some people will say I'm a manager, and you can hear that they definitely want to be seen as a manager and they tell people what to do.
It's interesting. We've often had discussions about what's the difference, name a great leader in life and name a great manager. And there certainly is a difference. I think leaders are generally quite inspirational.
Yes.
And whereas managers, and this sounds as if I'm dumbing the role of a manager down, which I'm not, but they are there to do they've got their aims and objectives. They've got a certain thing that they need to do. It's an interesting topic, actually, and you might want to do a podcast in the future, get a few people on in terms of who's some great leaders out there and who's some great managers, because in the sporting world there's some wonderful leaders, and there's some brilliant managers, and going back to what we said earlier, Graham, about people that are really good at their job, in the football world there's some phenomenal managers over the last 30 or 40 years that weren't actually very good footballers. There's some unbelievably good footballers that failed when it comes to management. And again, you ask yourself, why? Is it the support? Is it it's just,
I think some of it as well is the speaking with so I was somewhere a while ago, and when I was speaking to the employees, some of them, we were discussing the approach that particular company has, and I think some of it is the values of that company, that they will focus, because if you look about what the job titles are for, whether they be a leader or whether they be a manager, I think it tells you quite a lot about the ethos. That if there's if it's very the managers, that's the very, in fact, I don't want to say because it might be identifiable who it is, but that this particular manager that introduced themselves to somebody, let it known that so long as you do what I say, everything will be okay, and you do it my way, which didn't go down very well with this particular person. But that said an awful lot about the way that things were run.
Yeah,
that whole culture, instead of the let's work together on this.
That's it's a really interesting dynamic. I think that a lot of leaders are unemployable. That's what I'm going to say. I think a lot of leaders have to sit where they sit within an organization, because actually, if they didn't sit there, they couldn't sit anywhere else, because they are because they are unemployable, right? I think the biggest problem isn't necessarily for those leaders. The biggest problem these days is for management needing to adopt more leadership in their management. Because there is a contradiction there in a way, because someone that leads the charge in anything is probably quite disruptive, is color wise is a red, if you look at that sort of analysis of people. They have the ideas, they're an ideas person, and they need people that follow them and that will do the stuff so that they can get on and build. Because that's what you want them to do. You want them to lead. You want them to, be thinking 2 steps ahead of everybody else out there to lead. But managers do need to fit into the process and into the organization. They need to be seen to be, in some ways, they need to seem to be structured in so that you understand, as you say, things like objectives and key results and where we're actually going to get to this next quarter and everything else and how are we going to get there. But now, whereas before we relied heavily on micromanagement, and it's like looking over somebody's shoulder and going, well, how many have you done today? Well, you know, the quota's 15, you've only done 12. How, you know, we need to step that up a bit, son. Right? Nowadays they've got to lead. They've got to have empathy. They've got to help develop. They've got to, you know, and all of that stuff, quite often as well, all of that stuff means that they've got to do that whilst still doing the other bit of their job as well, because they still have quotas, they still have targets. They, you know, when you were talking about salespeople earlier, how many people are put into management roles in sales, but they still have to sell. So they've still got those sales targets and whatever, and that's the problem.
That's where it feels like it's that added. Again,
it's insurmountable.
I know that's the case, and this person doubts himself. So I'm very good, and I said, but you are, because probably because you do doubt yourself. But actually, what you do is you're not trying to tell people what to do. The reason you do what you do well and you lead the people that you arguably manage, because their title is a manager, is because you lead. And actually, there's times you've said that you've sat back and you've said, actually, do you know what? I'm going to let you do that. Despite the fact that they knew that they probably could do it and they might be able to do it better. They said that actually it's their time to shine and it's their time to build, because otherwise, if you hold everything and you keep doing it yourself, you're not giving anybody else and you're not leading, because leading isn't doing everything. Well,
Totally agree with that one. Yeah.
So how much of this can we bring back to training then? Because to me, it seems that great training is a really good answer.
Or my train the trainer course, actually.
Well, no, absolutely.
No, all jokes aside, I've had quite a lot of people either have said, gosh, our managers should come to this, largely because I do a lot of the psychology in there, and it's not even rocket science. It's not even rocket science. And there's other people who are managers that have said, whoa, I've learned a huge amount about management in here, and I'm not doing it very well. And I say, well, don't be hard on yourself. If you didn't know, then you didn't know, because as you said, Gary, how many people get chucked into a role and then they're like, no, I don't know how to do this. And then, of course, when there's a problem, everyone starts pointing the finger.
And because they're a manager, they are in their mind expected to know what to do. And they don't feel that they can then go to their line manager or their director and say, actually, I've just got this job. I don't know how to do this bit. And the director turns and says, well, I've just given you all this extra money. You know, I've given you all this extra responsibility. You told me you want a responsibility and you don't know how to do it. So people generally just clam up and say, okay, let's get on with it. And they muddle through. They might make some good mistakes and learn from them. But generally, I see a lot of managers failing because of what we've just spoken about, which is,
I think there needs to be much more focus on the people knowing what they're doing, instead of this always being in a hurry. Everything's in a hurry now, isn't it? Let's get people shoved through things quickly. And actually, Gary, you might, someone said to me the other day that they'd been somewhere and it was a football club, and for some reason they were talking to somebody that worked on the bar maybe, and they said that, oh gosh, and the penny dropped with this person what I do. They know what I do. And it was because this particular person said they had a problem with the lines, and they said, oh, we're just not really too sure how to do it. Someone came in to do some training years ago. Okay, and of course someone came in from the brewery to do this training, probably, I don't know whether they charged or not. They came in to do this training years ago. Well, a lot of people are left since then. So what ends up happening, a session that becomes maybe 7 hours, 6 hours, I don't know what it would be. We trained a load of people. Then people leave. Oh, well, that person will show you. They'll show you what to do. They'll train you. They'll show you what to do. So they do it. And then before you know it, this has been diluted and diluted down to probably maybe a half an hour, if you're lucky, that's third, fourth, fifth hand. And it was only at that point that person realised just what it is that I do and just why it is important that you, don't get me wrong, maybe that outsiders come in, but when you've got people internally that know how to educate people, then actually that training isn't actually so expensive. So that when I was saying, when I went out to the fire service last week, if they'd sent each of those firefighters, so bearing in mind anybody that was going to work on that, on those vehicles, so you want more of them to use it, £3,000 per person per day that was going to cost to go over to Germany. That's how much it was going to cost. So the particular person that was manager of the training department said, I know, and they actually are a qualified teacher themselves, let's train up the people here so that they can train. We've just saved a huge amount of money there, haven't we? And we've actually made it so that that can be done internally too. It's not, you know what I mean? And that's just how it can work.
Right. Now, that's an interesting one. I know, Graham, you're going to better say something. I'm just going to jump in because that relates directly to society in the world now, that success, and you mentioned it earlier, Graham, success is based on how much money you've got, the commercials. In fact, one of my favorite books, I'll give them a little plug. It's a really old book, actually. This one here, I'm sure. There we go. It's in focus. Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon.
Think and Grow Rich.
Absolutely brilliant book. Absolutely brilliant book. And people read the title and think, oh, yeah, I want to be rich. And they always relate rich to having loads of money.
Yeah.
And the amount of times I say to people, it's not about the money. Yes, don't get me wrong. You know, we need money. You need a roof over your head. You need food on the table. You want a little bit left over to do some nice things. But I just find the wealth in the country, in the world, unbelievable. And people haven't realized that they can't take it with them. And I just think, go and spend it now. But in terms of wealth, we are told, we're programmed from a really early age, aren't we? Go to school, work really hard, do your homework, pass all your exams, do your A-levels, go to university. If you work really hard, you'll get a really good job, which will pay you lots of money. And my attitude has probably always been, because I'm not particularly academic, my attitude has always been, what makes me happy? We are in the year 2024. You know what? Someone might be listening to this in 10 years' time, and they think, wow, that's what they were talking about 10 years ago. However, 2024, we've got now more cases of mental health issues, more depression, more anxiety, more stress than we did nearly 60 years ago in the 60s, when people had, if they were really lucky, a really wealthy family, had one car, might have had one television, and they made their own entertainment or whatever. We didn't have as much mental health issues back then as we do now. And I just find there's so much pressure on people to go out and make money. Now, don't get me wrong, we need the money, but
don't you think it's the doing it fast bit as well?
Well, it's fast track as well, isn't it? You know, rather than I mean,
but it's actually
it's fast track. I mean, Gary, I met Gary through the excluded group. When I reached out, his life had gone rather wrong, and it's taken me a long time, and finally things are sorting themselves out. But that's because I knew that I really wanted to do it, and actually I've not earned a lot of money for a long time. I haven't. I literally haven't. But I knew that I wanted to learn. And so when I was presented in front of somebody the other day, I was able to say, actually, I've got a really good product here that I know works really well, because I've taken the time to actually to know that it works. Other people who do it the other way around, they go and get some money from somewhere and go, oh, we're going to get all of these sales. And I was going, well, actually, do it the other way around.
Well, I was going to say, I actually think we're still making a mistake. And I think we're still making a mistake in education by actually putting pressure on young people to know very early on what they want to do and which way they need to go. I understand that you have to know in order for it to follow through for certain careers, etc., etc. But actually, I don't think our modern businesses need people with, I'm going to be controversial, I don't think our modern business needs people who go to university, get a degree, get into a job, which is what all of our fathers did and whatever. Yeah, well, a lot of them, actually, my father would, left school at 14. But at our generation, go to school, get a degree, get into a job, stay in the job. Because that, doesn't happen anymore. Nobody is staying in the job for 20, 30 odd years and getting the carriage clock. So that's fallacy. I don't think our modern industry wants that either. I think our modern industry needs people who are learning and progressing as they work. So therefore, actually, this system of go learn, get the education, whatever, then come in and then use what you've learned, that's rubbish. Really, we should be saying we need a system that says learn, get to a point where you're curious and you're interested in something, discover that, find out what you really, really love, etc. Learn whilst you're doing it so you get better at that. Learn which ways you want to go in that. Take some of that education, move it to the next thing, carry on your education. That's where it needs to be far more fluid than it was. So that means that doesn't agree with, oh, when you're 14, 15, you need to know what sort of degree you're going to do. No, you shouldn't. You should maybe find your way there as you know that it's relevant to what you're doing, so that actually we start to line those things up a bit better. And I think also, I was also going to say a little thing on the management needing trainer. I think everybody in an organization needs trainer. And I'll tell you for why, because I think everybody needs it, because ultimately managers should be leading, and part of leadership is delegating, and delegating means that everybody needs to be able to train the next person and the person under, that's below them, that's coming up or whatever. So therefore that whole process of disseminating information and doing it well and doing it better needs to be better, right?
Even giving
if we just
feedback.
rely on but if we rely on one or two people within an organization to be the ones that can help develop people within an organization, it's not a strong organization. If we make everybody
going along those lines, Graham, something that you've got to put into management training and leadership training is succession planning, and people don't do it because they are scared. You've got a lot of directors out there of companies that are saying, well, we've heard this in training, Marianne, so many times. What if we train them and they get really good at their job and they leave?
I know.
And it's that old comic sort of a cartoon thing that says, what if we don't train them and they stay?
So, yeah.
And it makes you think, but you've got a lot
how
of
about training them so well they don't want to leave?
Well, there is that. Make the environment so good that they don't want to leave for whatever
reason.
I
would say most people don't go into a job and go, do you know what? I think I want to leave. And I mean, we were doing some work, me and Ian, a while ago at looking, there was some funding available for social care sector to keep people and get them to progress. And a lot of people, then we were looking at neurodiversity because there's high levels of neurodiversity within the social care sector. And and I recall back, I had millions of jobs. I look back and I laugh now, and I think all those jobs have given me a lot of material to work with when I'm teaching, at least. But I got bored. And I remember saying once, I don't know how long it was, after 6 months, 3 months, probably a week, and just saying, I'd quite like to be a senior, maybe. No, you've got to be a year before you can do that. Well, you might as well just shout in my face and tell me to go away, because I'm going, a year? Yeah, you've got to be a year. Well, what happens if somebody's got the qualities? So I'd leave. So every single time I would leave and I'd go somewhere else. So part of what the funding was, it was looking at people that work within the social care sector and saying, what can we offer them? And the two things that we were offering was the trainer and the behavioural leadership management, so that you can actually earmark people, whether it is just they're running shifts or what it is, that you actually give people something to stay for. Because if people are going to get bored, they're going to.
I think a lot of senior roles are becoming much more transitory as we go on, and I think that's a good thing. I actually think I was doing an HR stroke recruitment podcast the other day, and heard that it is beginning to change. That actually, whilst some organisations are still a little bit dubious about someone that seems to be chopping and changing on their CV all of the time, it depends whether you got the story that goes with it. If you've got the strategy to go with it, then it's fine. It's if you say, well, the reason I keep changing jobs is because I don't like the management, then that's not going to wash. But if you actually say, and I want to come into your organisation because I feel that I can effect change at this point in time for your organisation at this size that it is, and I really am looking to be here for 2 years or whatever, whilst you exponentially grow to here, and then I feel that my job here will be done, and actually then I want to move on. That's a completely different story, and actually perhaps we need more of that.
No, I'm all in favour of that, because as again, we don't want to put people in. You said it earlier, Graham. People don't stay in jobs now for 30 or 40 years. It's generally unheard of. And also, we've also got to acknowledge that there are loads and loads of different styles of jobs out there, and we are all different people. And one of the most, going back to our leadership discussion, one of the best things I ever heard, both my children have gone through the education system. And when you have to go around picking a senior school, I remember I used to get bored at that. But you would get the head teacher stand up and they'd put on the screen behind them, these are our GCSE results, this is how good we are, etc. And one particular school, the head teacher put up literally for 10 seconds, said, these are our results from the last few years. However, I'm going to turn that off. And he went in to explain that what he wants to do within, it's 5 years, isn't it, in senior school now? Years 7 to 11, is that right? I'm old school. Years 7 to 11, 5 years. He said, we cannot all be academic. He said, we cannot all go to Oxford or Cambridge. We all cannot become doctors or whatever. He said, but what my ambition for these pupils at school is, when they leave, they are well-rounded individuals. And that was his thing.
That's teaching. That's the process teaching, not the product.
Yes. Yeah.
About the journey, not just.
And it was about not having the. Not everyone's going to sort of A stars or whatever, but as long as they have a well-rounded individual that could get on in society, then they're going to find a place.
It is. It's about the people that are out there. Not, that's what I say to people. It's not just about all the grades you get. Even to my son struggles and and he, when he had to choose his GCSEs, and he said, oh, I don't know whether to do this, I don't know whether to do that. And he said, because I really enjoy doing that, but that's going to make me more money. And I said, well, and I thought it was quite sensible. He was sort of thinking about that. But, and now he's being forced at college, being told that he has to do 3 BTECs, even though he'll cope with 2. And we said, but surely he's better to do 2. No, you have to do a foundation year and then go and then do the 3 BTECs. And I said, but just let him do 2. Oh, no, we can't do that. And I just shake my head at that, obviously, because that's not going to sit well with me.
Well, it's been a fantastic conversation. For anyone that's noticed, Gary actually is frozen on the screen. You can hear his voice, but he's frozen. He doesn't normally look like that.
Yeah, but that's worth a screenshot, isn't it? Look at that. But yeah, I can hear you all, but I'm frozen.
Which has brought us round nicely to the beginning of the conversation, which was about musicals, because Frozen is a musical. There you go. You see, everything goes round in a circle. Everything fits together. Gary, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're very welcome.
We can do golf. I think that's why he's frozen in time. So maybe the rain.
Gary's actually only here in spirit now. He's actually out on the golf course. Thank you so much for listening or watching. If you've enjoyed this conversation, please do join in. If there's something that we've raised today that you feel, oh my word, I have a, you know, something to say on that.